Under the bruised gold of a dying sun, the plains stretched endless and whispering. Dust rose from every hoofbeat like breath from some sleeping god. Colt Rawlins, 30 years old, rode with his hat pulled low and his heart still lower. The people called him the giant cowboy, though he never felt giant, only hollow, only tired. The wind slid over his shoulders as if to ask what he was running from. He did not answer. Some pains are too old for words. By the time the sky bruised purple, his horse staggered from thirst. He smelled smoke, wood fire, faint and sweet. Colt followed it through a valley carved by river ghosts, where the scent of sage mingled with the musk of damp earth. There she was, a figure in stillness by a low fire, her shadow dancing across the canyon wall. Ayanna, 20, of the Apache people, hummed a tune that sounded older than the moon itself. When Colt's boot cracked a twig, she rose swift as lightning, her hand slipping to a knife at her hip. Her eyes found him, black glass catching every flicker of firelight. "You lost, cowboy?" she asked, her voice sharp yet musical. Colt raised his hands slow, his words thick with dust. "Only trying to find a place to rest before dawn." His throat tightened, every syllable felt like gravel. Ayanna studied him long, her gaze tracing the scars that mapped his jaw, the wear in his clothes. "This isn't land for resting," she said finally. "It's land for surviving." He nodded, removing his hat. "Then let me survive here a while." The fire cracked, the night hummed, and something fragile passed between them, something like recognition. She motioned for him to sit. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of ghosts and questions neither dared to voice. He warmed his hands by the fire, feeling the sting of heat. After some time, she asked, "Why does a white man ride alone in Apache land?" Colt stared into the flame, seeing faces in the embers. "Because men I rode with think I stole from them. Cattle, gold, a man's good name." He gave a bitter laugh. "They're ridin' after me now. And if they find me alone, they'll hang me come sunrise." The wind shifted. A coyote cried somewhere in the distance. Ayanna said nothing. Her eyes softened, though her posture stayed proud. Colt's voice dropped, low as prayer. "They won't search a tent that belongs to a married man. Wouldn't risk insultin' a woman." He swallowed hard. "I need your help. Just for one night. Can you act as my wife tonight?" Her hand froze midair. For a moment, he thought she might strike him. Then came her quiet, cutting laugh. "You think Apache women are costumes for white men's lies?" "I think," he said softly, "you're my only chance to see another sunrise." The fire flickered against her cheekbones, drawing light along the curve of her face. She looked at him as one might study a wild animal, half pity, half warning. Then she nodded once, curt and final. "Only tonight." Outside the ring of light, the desert murmured. They built a crude shelter of brush and cloth. The moon cast a pale glow across Colt's face, revealing the weariness behind his strength. Ayanna sat beside him, arms crossed. "When they come," he said, "we'll have to be close, make it look true." She met his gaze without flinching. "You're shaking." "Not from fear," he said. "From shame." The night deepened. The posse arrived sooner than he'd hoped. Their lanterns swung like orange stars over the ridge. Hooves thundered down. Ayanna took a slow breath, then, with steady grace, slipped her hand into Colt's. His heart lurched. The riders pulled up, their leader squinting at the tent. "Evenin', ma'am," he said. "You seen a tall drifter, goes by Rawlins?" Ayanna tilted her chin, her tone calm as dawn. "My husband and I saw no one. He's been with me all night." Colt felt her hand tremble in his, but her voice never broke. The men exchanged uncertain glances, muttered, then turned their horses. Dust swallowed their figures one by one until only silence remained. Ayanna exhaled slowly, releasing his hand. "You can let go now," she said. He didn't. His voice came like a confession. "Don't think I can." The fire burned low. Outside, a wolf howled, a lonely note in a vast, indifferent world. Morning bled pale across the horizon. Colt saddled his horse in silence. "I owe you more than I can pay," he said. Ayanna looked away, her expression unreadable. "Go. Before your enemies change their minds." He hesitated, then reached into his coat, pulling out a small silver locket. "Was my mother's. Keep it. To remember that not all lies stay lies." She accepted it without meeting his eyes. He mounted, and for a moment, he thought he saw regret flicker across her face. Then the sun swallowed him, and she was alone again. Weeks turned to months. The war between settlers and the Apache grew crueler. Smoke often painted the horizon. The sound of gunfire echoed through canyons like thunder without rain. Ayanna carried the locket around her neck, its cool metal pressing against her heartbeat. She told herself it meant nothing. Yet sometimes, in dreams, she saw the cowboy's face lit by firelight, his eyes filled with something almost like grace. Then, one night near the river, she found him again. Or rather, he found her, half-conscious, bleeding, his horse dead beside him. "Colt Rawlins," she whispered, kneeling. "You just don't stop finding trouble, do you?" He opened his eyes, clouded by fever. Didn't know where else to go. She carried him to her shelter with the strength of quiet fury. Through days and nights she nursed him, grinding herbs, cooling his brow, whispering prayers to spirits who might still listen. He spoke little, but sometimes, in delirium, he called her name as though it were both wound and salvation. When the fever broke, he found her watching the dawn. "You could have left me to die," he said. "I could have," she replied, not looking at him. "Why didn't you?" She turned at last, her eyes shimmering. "Because even the desert gives mercy to those who crawl long enough." A silence passed, heavy with the things they could not say. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. "You made me want to be an honest man," he murmured. "Then be one," she said. For a long while, they sat as the sun climbed over the canyon, washing the world in gold. Weeks later, the tribe gathered under a night of endless stars. There was no church, no white linen, no preacher, only drums, the rhythm of fire, and the murmur of wind through sage. Colt stood tall, dressed in worn leather, his hands trembling. He knelt before Ayanna. "Will you act as my wife forevermore?" She smiled faintly, eyes soft as dusk. "No," she said. He blinked, startled, until she added, "I will be your wife." The elders stepped forward, tying a crimson cloth around their joined hands. The drums deepened, voices rose in chant, and the stars above seemed to lean closer. When their eyes met, it was not as captor and captive, nor as two from warring worlds. It was simply man and woman, fragile and alive in a world that had tried to break them both. But peace in the West was a brief dream. One dawn, Colt was taken again, ambushed, dragged to town by the same ranchers' men who'd once hunted him. They said they had proof now. They wanted blood, not truth. Word reached Ayanna by dusk. She rode alone into town, the red cloth from their wedding fluttering behind her like a flag of defiance. People stopped and stared, the Apache woman riding through white men's streets, her head high. In the courthouse, the air reeked of sweat and judgment. The sheriff sneered. "You here to watch your husband hang?" Ayanna stood straight. "I'm here to save him." Her voice carried through the hall like the ring of steel. She spoke of the rancher's greed, his brother's deceit, of nights spent hiding stolen cattle. She told them where the evidence lay, her truth burning through their prejudice like fire through dry grass. By sunset, the real thief confessed. Colt was freed. When he stepped outside, blinking into the light, she stood waiting at the edge of the square, wind in her hair, eyes glimmering. He approached slowly, his voice rough with awe. "You saved me again." "No," she said, touching his chest lightly. "You saved yourself. I just reminded you how." The world seemed to pause then, the dust, the sun, even the distant cry of a hawk. He pulled her into his arms, not in passion but in peace, the kind born of surviving storms together. Years later, at the edge of the same desert that once divided them, a small cabin stood. Laughter spilled from its doorway, 2 children chasing the wind, a dog barking at the horizon. On the porch, Colt sat strumming a guitar, his hands still scarred, his eyes still soft when they found Ayanna. She hung the red cloth each spring over the doorpost, its color faded but alive. "For remembrance," she would say. Colt smiled. "You still hum that song from the fire. And you still look at me like that first night," she answered. He watched the sun sink beyond the plains, the sky set ablaze in every color of their story. Sometimes, when the wind rose, he swore he could still hear the echo of that night, the fire crackle, her heartbeat, the question that had started it all. "Can you act as my wife tonight?" And how strange, he thought, that pretending had become the truest thing he'd ever known. The wind turned gentle, wrapping them both in the soft sigh of the prairie. Somewhere a coyote called, and the sound felt like home. And if you ever ride through that wide and whispering land, listen closely when the night grows still. You might hear it too. The story of a man who begged and a woman who forgave, who turned a borrowed lie into forever. Because sometimes the wild does not destroy us. Sometimes it teaches us how to stay. And love, when it comes, fragile, uninvited, and trembling like firelight, asks only one thing of us, that we do not turn away.